Okay, we are in Yud Amud Aleph, 19a. We begin now chapter 3 of Tractate Sotah. So we come to a new beginning. So the Gemara, the laws of Sotah, has been progressively taking us through the proceeding of the Sotah. It began with the husband's warning, who can warn, how often, what kind of warning, what's the wording of the warning, how many witnesses to the warning. Then we went to the seclusion, how many witnesses to the seclusion, what do we know, what don't we know? And we talked about the journey from wherever they live all the way up to the temple, right? Travel with, accompanied by others to make sure there's no misbehaving along the way. Then we got to when they arrive in the temple, what the kohen tells her. They move her around, they rip her clothing, the whole business. Then we got to what am I missing? Then we got to the details of the potion that she drinks, the water, the ink, the parchment, what's written on the parchment, the earth, where's the earth from, how much earth. And what was the last thing we discussed? The last thing we discussed was
the husbands.
Right, how many people can warn? But before that, we were talking about something else. Oh, the vow, the oath that the kohen administers, and the curse that he says. Now, we mentioned before on his journey that he brings a offering, right? He brings an offering, a meal offering. And the meal offering we mentioned in a previous Mishnah, when we describe the journey, is of a lower standard. So no oil, no frankincense, which is normally accompanied with a meal offering, and not the high grade wheat that's usually brought, but rather a low grade barley that's brought. So it's a low grade offering because it's representing low grade behavior, and therefore it's a low grade offering. And he brings it in sal ha-mitzvahs, which is a right kfifa mitzvahs. I'm sorry, not sal mitzvahs, kfifa mitzvahs, which is a kind of wicker basket that they would make in Egypt. It's a cheap basket as opposed to the other ones where the person brings it in silver and gold. Right? That's what we described in a previous mission. Remember this? Yeah. So now they arrived in the temple. They went through the whole thing. They prepared the water. So the Mishnah now is going to discuss the proceeding of the actual meal offering. This is where we are right now in the whole chain of events. Right. So she already has the oath. She didn't drink the water yet. We'll get to that in a minute. The order of which one comes first, the offering or the water drinking. We'll get to that in a minute. But the oath has been administered. She's been essentially publicly shamed in some ways. All that stuff has already happened. And now there's time to bring the actual offering. So it says the Mishnah. So you can see it in the bold, right, where the new chapter begins. The kohen would then take, the husband, would then take her meal offering, from within that Egyptian wicker basket, and he puts it into the consecrated vessels that belong to the temple, and then gives it to her to hold. So this is the final part that a non-kohen is allowed to do. Services in the temple, only the kohen is allowed to do. So from this point forward, everything is going to be done by the kohen. But the last thing the husband's allowed to do, or a non-kohen, is to put it into that vessel that belongs to the temple. This is how Rashi tells us to understand it. The husband takes the flour that was in this, that he brought in this wicker basket, in this Egyptian wicker basket, and then he puts it into the consecrated vessel that belongs to the temple, and then gives it to her. So she's holding it now. She's holding a consecrated vessel filled with this flour. The kohen maniach yadai mitachtaha. Now the kohen places his hands below her hands. She's holding the baskets, let's say like this, and his hands are now below hers. Umenifa. And then they wave it. They wave it. They wave it in all directions, up, down, right, left. They wave it together. They wave this vessel full of flour. Hanif, once it's been waved, now vehigish, he now brings that vessel and brings it toward or presents it to the altar, not offered yet, but just bringing it to the altar. So he doesn't climb up. He's on the bottom of the altar and he brings it close to one of the walls. Specifically, Rashi tells us it is where is it? To the corner, to the southwest corner of the temple, of the altar. This is a not uncommon, it's a fairly common practice in the temple. There's often one part of the offering, the final part of the offering, which goes up to the actual altar. But there's often another part of the offering which is brought to the side, to the walls of the altar.
They still have to stay in the middle.
In the middle.
They stay in the middle. So they're right smack in front of the middle of the opening of the altar.
That's the opening to the next room. The altar is positioned in such a way, according to one opinion, positioned in such a way that it's facing the entrance to the next room. Yeah, that's correct. That's right. So he has to stand in such a way that we discussed this before, you're right, that he has to stand in such a way that he's facing both the altar and the entrance. That's right. And he doesn't have to right, what did we say? That he doesn't have to take the basket and push it up against the wall of the altar just to place it near the altar like that, right? That's what we told, remember that? So that's what he has, that's called Hagasha. Hagasha means to bring close, right? So part one is the waving, that's Hanif, then Higish, brings it to the altar. On the bottom of the altar, the base of the altar just brings it close to that corner. Now Kamatz, now the Kohen does something called Kmitza, or Kamatz in the verb. And that is taking a fistful of the flour. And that fistful is offered on the temple, offered on the altar. And then for the Hikdir, he offers it on the altar. That little fistful. Now the actual bowl of flour is much bigger, much more than just a fistful. So it's only one fistful of the offering that's being offered on the altar. Bashar, and the remainder, Nechal HaKoyanim, is eaten by the Koyanim. This is again a very common practice through many offerings. Some offerings, there are three classes of offerings in general. Every offering has at least one part of the offering, whether it's an animal offering, a wine libation, or in this case, the flour. One part always goes to God and is offered on the altar. In this case, it's the kmitza, the fistful. Then there are some in which the entire animal is offered, or the entire offering is offered to God. There are some where some part goes to God and the rest is eaten by the kohen, and some where some part goes to the altar to God, some part to the kohen, and some part to the owners who brought it. This is a kind of offering where the fistful goes on the altar to Hashem, and the rest is eaten by the kohen. They would probably bake it into some cake first. I don't think they ate the plain flour. Usually they mix it with oil and frankincense, but this one's not supposed to get oil and frankincense. So I'm not sure how they baked it. It's a good question. Maybe the Gemara will discuss it. Maybe the Gemara will discuss it. It's a good question. Ash doesn't mention anything.
Alan doesn't want to eat anything bland.
The Kohanim would eat quite a bit of raw materials, like raw, not raw as in uncooked, but plain meat, a lot of it. To the point that the temple actually had a doctor on payroll to help the Kohen, because they walk barefoot on marble, which is quite, that's right, walk barefoot on marble, which is quite cold, and there's lots of food that they have to consume, wine and oil and flour and meat, so they have a doctor on staff. They can turn you into the pharmacist on staff, maybe.
Or you can maybe advocate for heat. They had a fireplace.
And there was a hearth. It's called a hearth, right? No, it's called like a big fireplace. Hearth, right? There was a hearth, and when the Kohen would go in there, and they had like bleachers levels where they would sit to warm up. And where? I'm talking about the altar. You're talking about the altar. The altar had more than one fire actually, but certainly big enough for, it's quite big. I'm talking about a hearth, like a heating room, a room to warm up. The room where they slept had a fire in the middle, and they would sleep on these benches on the sides. Yeah, that's right. Masechta Talmud describes that. Okay, so this is the order of the offering.
It's interesting, well, want to participate in meal offering of this type, not a celebratory kind of.
It's a mitzvah nonetheless.
Yeah.
A mitzvah is a mitzvah, whether we like it or not, right? That's the point.
Not a gourmet meal.
No.
They're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mitzvah. But you know what? Think about it that way. A kohen is eating an unpleasant meal.
Yeah.
Why? Because he wants to help another person's marriage. That's a level of obviously so a level of loving a fellow Jew. The kohenim in general must have had or ought to have had quite a level of loving a fellow Jew. They were eating lots of meat and getting sick. Why? For some other guy who needs to get an atonement. It's quite the service, right? Serving Hashem equals serving other Jews.
You might be killing her also.
Right. That would be on her because she chose to go through with it by not confessing. That would be on her. But the kohen in general, serving God means also serving his fellow Jew. He's got to do these things for his fellow Jew. It's quite something. It's just an interesting point. Sorry?
How much meat do they have to eat?
No, sometimes that's the entirety. Prohibition, not to leave anything behind. Often the case. We have to burn it, but the mitzvah is still to eat the whole thing. Certainly most, if not all offerings. It's a lot. It's a lot of consumption. A lot of meat consumption.
And
Flour, oil, wine. Anyway. So the Gemara continues now. The phrasing of the next few lines of the Mishnah is somewhat ambiguous and implies something that the Gemara is going to clarify for us. So I'm going to read it literally, and then I'll tell us how the Gemara is going to clarify it. So you kind of get like a spoiler, because the Gemara is going to clarify it for us later. The actual phrasing of the Mishnah is like this. Haya mashke, he would give her to drink the water, and afterwards he offers the offering. Now the phrasing is interesting. That's the literal translation. If we were to go with this literal translation, it would almost sound as if there's an offering. The Torah used before that describe the way the offering was described. To describe the fistful of offering the word was haktarah, makdir, and then it says drink, and then afterwards it says again to offer, using the word hakrava. It almost sounds as if there is an offering, drinking another offering. Mashke means to be drink, or is a drink. Because that's in Hebrew we say mashke as in like it's a drink. Yeah? Mashke just means to drink, or to make drunk, to make drink. And I say to make something drink is mashke, or it could be just a drink as in like the noun. Okay, so yeah, depending on the context. Yeah. Right. So again, sorry. Yeah. So again, the context of the Mishnah, the phrasing of the Mishnah sounds as if there's an offering of the flour, then she drinks the water, and then there's another offering. The Gemara is going to clarify for us that there's actually only one offering. And we should read it with a period, not with a comma. Meaning to say, now that we describe the offering, now we're going to get into which one comes first, drinking or offering. But not that there's another offering later. The Gemara is going to clarify that for us. But the phrasing almost sounds like there's an offering, drinking, and then an offering. When in reality, there's an offering described before, the order, waving, bringing it close, and then the offering, and then the kohenim eat. Now, having described the offering, now let's get to which one comes first, the drinking or the offering. But not that, as it would seem from the simple phrasing, there's an offering, a drinking, and another offering. So the Gemara is going to clarify that for us, but I'm just giving you both readings so that when we get to the Gemara, we know what we're talking about.
When you say offering, you mean meal offering, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so this is the opinion of the Tanna Kama, the first sage, which is that the drinking precedes the offering, which is why we described the drinking before in the last chapter. Now we're describing the offering, because we're going in the order of events. Drinking first, and then offering. So last chapter we described the drinking at length, the water, the flour, the ingredients, and all the rest of it, and the oath that's administered when she drinks. And now we're describing the offering. That's the order of events. But Rabbi Shimon is of the view that makrives minchasa, first they would offer the meal offering, the achakach, and only afterward hayamashka, then she would drink the water. So Rabbi Shimon is the reverse. First offering, then drink. Whereas the original The original sage, Tanakama, and this is indeed the halacha, is first drink, then offering. Rabbi Shimon says, first offering, then drink. Why does he say that? Shenemar, because the verse reads, Ba'achar yashke sa'isha samayim, and only after should they give the woman to drink of the water. So because the word after is written, implying after the meal offering is done, whereas the way the Tanakhama is reading it is, and this is all, let's read the whole verse. The verse reads, I don't know if you have it there, but the verse reads over here, I have it in the corner of the page. The kohen should take the fistful, bring it on the altar, and after, the woman should drink the water. So the simple reading is, as Rabbi Shimon notes, first offer, then drink. Whereas the Tanakhama is reading it, offer, and this is all after he already gave her a drink. That is, the drinking comes first. Okay? The Gemara is going to explain later the details of how they derive this verse and how they read it. The dispute between the first sage and the second sage. But the bottom line is, dispute, Tanakama says, drink, then offer. Rabbi Shimon writes, offer, then drink. But Rabbi Shimon concludes, im hishkav, if they reverse the order and they gave her a drink and only afterwards brought the offering, ksheda, it's still valid. So even the Rabbi Shimon says the proper way to do it is first drink, first offer, then drink. If they did it the reverse, like the other opinion says to do, then it's kosher. Okay, so that remains the halacha to first drink and then do the offering. So this is the Mishnah.
Did she have a share in the meal?
No, she doesn't eat it. Only the kohen eats it.
Why should the kohen not do it? It's all about her.
Why does the kohen eat it? Or past the clinics? Sorry.
Well, power does not give the kohen.
Why the kohen? Good question. We can think about that for on the simple level. Okay, this is what Hashem said to do. Finished. But let's think about what the message might be. Why the kohen has to eat it and not her?
Why is the kohen?
It's a mitzvah, yeah. But I'm trying to think of what the message might be. Right? Yeah, but I'm thinking maybe kohen represents chesed, kindness, love of Hashem, and perhaps that's the antidote to the misplaced love is to be consumed in love of Hashem. Maybe that's the messaging.
Sorry for the women.
I don't think it's such a pleasant meal. It's low-grade barley. It's not like it's good fancy delicacy. Doesn't seem like a very pleasant meal. But perhaps he's consuming it because he represents love of Hashem. And this was misplaced love, misplaced attraction. And the solution is to be consumed by love of Hashem, consumed by the kohen. Perhaps that's the message. I don't know. Just thinking aloud. Yeah, what do you say, Scott?
Why is there a dispute whether she drinks first or with the offering first?
Is there a dispute in how to read the verse?
Why should there be a dispute there?
There's a dispute in how to understand the verses. The Gemara is going to detail exactly how they each understand the verses. But it comes down to understanding the verse. How do you read the verse? What would be the spiritual significance of one? Right, either way it's kosher, but what would be the spiritual significance of which one comes first? Her drinking or the offering? That's something, let's think about that. Maybe by the time we get to the Gemara's discussion, we'll have some explanation. What's the spiritual significance of drinking first versus offering first? Good question.
But this drink is going to determine her innocence or her guilt. So if she drinks first and she's guilty,
she'll die. Yeah.
She'll die.
Only after let's just assume that she will, right? But it's only after the offering is offered, right? So let's think. What would be? We'll have to think about it more. What's the spiritual significance of drinking before offering or offering before drinking? Because offering represents sacrifice. That's what offering represents. No, like as part of our atonement, which one comes first? Sacrifice. And what does drinking represent in terms of the atonement? Drinking of the water.
It's the ultimate going to prove whether her innocence.
I'm talking about the spirituality of it, like in terms of like our relationship with Hashem, let's say, right? The Sotah represents, we represent God's the husband with wife, and we're the strayed wife. We're indulging in other things instead of connecting with our true lover, with Hashem.
Like the blood,
Sorry?
drinking like the blood portion of the offering where the blood is poured on the wall.
Maybe.
And then the burning of it.
That the blood that's brought to the altar is more like the flour that's brought close to the altar. Right, that would be a parallel.
Okay, yeah, that
But maybe I'm just thinking like sacrifice.
The last thing is usually the atonement of any.
Right. Is the sprinkling, yeah.
Burning of the.
But let's think about this, right?
iron, right?
Yeah. I'm talking about in terms of this. Yeah. Sorry. Finish your thoughts.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe like the sacrifice in atonement, there are two stages, let's say. One is swallowing your guilt, meaning to say accepting responsibility. And one is to make a sacrifice. You're truly sorry about how you acted and make a sacrifice not to do it again. Right?
All this can be in vain. Because she will do it.
Yeah, it's not in vain, God forbid, because she still gets her atonement. Right? She still fulfilled the mitzvah. I'm talking about like in terms of our relationship with Hashem, what are the parallels here to our own atonement as we achieve atonement from Hashem? Because we're the woman who strayed. That's what we are, right? In the Ten Commandments, God is referred to as El Kana, the jealous God. This word Kana is the same word that's used to describe the husband who's jealous of his wife, right? So we're the wife, Hashem is the husband, and we're the ones who stray by indulging in other indulgences instead of focusing on our true beloved. So we need atonement. And as we go through atonement, our spiritual process parallels the physical mitzvahs of the Sotah. So that in the process of atonement, there's a sacrifice that has to be made. We have to make a sacrifice. If we're truly going to change our ways, there's going to be sacrifices we have to make to sacrifice certain pleasures, to sacrifice certain things. And on the other hand, we have to swallow. Drinking of the water represents accepting responsibility. Maybe like we're swallowing.
God admits it in the flesh, isn't he?
Sorry.
He's a jealous God.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. He's like the husband. He's the jealous husband, right? So the drinking of the water is like to accept responsibility. And if it comes along with a curse, then so be it. We're taking responsibility for our actions. So maybe there's the question, which one comes first? Taking responsibility for your actions and then make your sacrifice? Or make a sacrifice moving forward, and then you'll accept responsibility after. Maybe that would be the difference of opinion here on the spiritual level. Follow what I'm saying? I'm taking responsibility for my behaviors. That come first. And then once I've taken responsibility for the past, then I can move forward and sacrifice and make my own personal sacrifice for my relationship with Hashem, or start right away going forward. Sacrifice for Hashem going forward. And then also, I have to drink. Afterwards, I can drink and take responsibility for my past behavior. Maybe there's the two ways of thinking.
The guy who she was
Perhaps. What do you guys think?
with,
I'm just thinking out loud, but the floor is open to think about.
Cut and dry.
No, I mean, this is my suggestion.
No, I know that.
I'm just thinking about it now because you asked.
If you go back and forth, it's not cut and dry.
Which one comes first?
Right.
Maybe that's why there's a dispute.
It's not like, in order for you to hit the ball, I have to throw it,
Yeah,
right? You can't hit the ball before I throw it.
right. Which is why there's a dispute. Meaning because there's a way to think of it this way, there's a way to think of it that way.
Right.
And then even the one who says that you should do the offering first also says, by the way, if you do the drinking first, it's still okay. So even he is not like, this is how it has to be. So
Right,
maybe,
so that's what I'm saying, it's not cut and dry.
so maybe each person might find in their own personal journey that it's first important to take responsibility and then important then to make sacrifices in their life so they can build in the future. And some people might find the other way. Sacrifice first for my relationship, but then take responsibility. But either way, it might have been a valid way of doing it, perhaps, yeah, because both opinions are valid.
Both opinions are valid and they both have to go hand in hand.
Perhaps, yeah.
One cannot go without the other.
In the spiritual way, we can say that. In halacha, it's either one or the other, but in the spiritual way, we can say that. What were we going to say?
what I find is unfair is the guy who she was suspected of going out with
Yeah,
or secluding herself with. He's just as guilty as she is,
yeah.
and he doesn't get punished.
What did we say? No, we said the water affects all three. The water that she drinks affects her if she was misbehaving, and it affects the one with whom she misbehaved, and it affects the husband if he was misbehaving, right? Is that what we learned? That it affects all three? Didn't we learn that?
I remember it affects both of them.
Definitely the husband. I'm pretty sure also you remember that it affects the other, so I'm pretty sure it's all three.
Definitely
I'm quite sure it's all three. It said, I'm pretty sure it said, just like it tests the wife, it tests the one with whom she was promiscuous, and it tests the husband. It goes to all three.
And could they die too?
Yeah, if that's what Hashem deems it through the effect of the water. Go back to the earlier pages, I'm quite sure. Okay, so we'll stop over here, and God willing, tomorrow we're going to look at the Gemara, which is first going to analyze the fact that the Kohen's hand also has to be there, not just when they do the waving, the Kohen has to put his hands under her hands, which again, I open the floor for spiritual significance. What's the significance of both of them doing it together? We'll discuss the halacha of it, where they derive that from the verses tomorrow. After that, we're going to discuss that anomaly in the language that I pointed out earlier. And then afterwards, we'll discuss the dispute about which one comes first, the drinking or the offering. Okay, have a wonderful day, Yidden.